Give and go. Here's Briere. Shoots! He hit the post. Tanana playing the puck. Oh, what heat on that shot. I swear, if you look at Cam Briere, he looks like Danny Briere, Flyers general manager, but there is no relation. I did hear, though, from Kendall Grayson that I believe Cam Briere's father, Steve, is the equipment manager for the Minnesota Wild.
I love that video clip. So that was last season when my son was playing in the USHL. And what I learned was stay humble. When you think you're somebody, you're just like everybody else. So stay humble. Next thing. So today when I talk to you guys, I'm going to try to take you guys on a journey. Usually when I do these conferences or speaking engagements, it's usually very specific. Goal scoring, goaltending, a specific part of goaltending. And for this one, I thought, you know what? Nobody wants to hear about that. We got head coaches, we got goalie coaches, we got assistant coaches, we got managers. And instead, I was going to take you guys on a journey. And it's my path to the NHL. But what I want you guys to take along the way is I don't want you to really worry about the story. I mean, who really gives a shit where I played? That's the next warning is I do tend to swear. Okay? Anybody take offense to that? I'll try my best. But no promises, okay? But nobody really cares where I played and what I did. But what I want you to do is, as I tell my story, to take the pieces out of it, okay? Really important pieces that make me who I am today. And then at the end of my speech, I'm going to go through how I coach in the NHL today. So just give me a couple seconds here to go through these things. So just like everybody else in Canada, I grew up wanting to be a goaltender in the NHL. Unfortunately, I was born to two teenage parents. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, we just didn't have any money. When I say we didn't have any money, that's not a sob story. We lived in people's basements until I was 6 years old. And then my parents finally graduated high school. They went into their fields and we did amazing. But at the time, when you grow up in Canada, you can rent the hockey equipment. So it was no big deal, you know, $200 to play hockey, you rent the equipment. I get into AA hockey, and you don't get the equipment anymore. You can't rent it. So you have to buy your own equipment. So 9 years old, AA hockey, I sold all my toys at a flea market. I lived in the city in Winnipeg, and I literally took all my toys. And I went to a flea market, and I traded them in for $60. And I bought my first glove and blocker. And I don't know, you guys can't really see, the sun's beating in here, but they're blue. And I thought they were the coolest glove and blocker in the world. I still have them. I have them on the wall. It was the first glove I got with a cheater on it. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. As you can see, I used marker, made sure I put my number on it and everything. And so the first thing was, how bad did I want it? How bad did I want to be a goalie? So then make it up to AAA hockey. And of course, again, now, you know, you're in the big dogs, you're playing AAA hockey. And again, I wanted to have equipment that matched the team, right? I mean, you don't want blue glove and blocker when you're playing for a Chicago Blackhawks team. So the first part of this is when I made the AAA team, this is the All-Star game, but when I made AAA, again, we couldn't afford it. AAA was really expensive for my family. So I actually got cut from the team because I couldn't pay the registration fee. And I called a lady by the name of Diane Woods. Anybody from Winnipeg would know Diane Woods. She's very famous. She passed away now. But I called her and I said, this is bullshit. I'm good enough to make the team. I'm good enough to play AAA hockey. What if I pay with my paper route money $100 a week? And I got the very first AAA scholarship that they give out in Winnipeg. They give it out every year. It's the Steve Briere Scholarship Fund. And they give it to people that can't afford to play hockey. And so for the first almost 10 years, I gave out the award to the child that didn't have the money to play. So that was an amazing thing. Again, how at 11 years old, 12 years old, I called the president of AAA hockey to ask to pay for my paper route, I don't know. But how bad do you want it? Glove and blocker. There was a pro shop in behind 7-Eleven downtown. It was called Pete's Pro Shop. And I went into Pete and I said to him, Pete, will you let me take the glove and blocker and pay you back? And I'll bring you money every single Friday until I pay it off. And amazingly, Pete let me take the glove and blocker. This was my first team colored glove and blocker. It was unbelievable. Heat and glove and blocker. Again, I kept these, and Pete let me do it. So again, how bad do you want it, right? So I go through AA, AAA. I get drafted in the WHL. I play junior hockey. It doesn't matter. Last year, junior hockey, I get mono. And I go, the only school that offered me any money was a Division III school in the US. And I didn't know anything about college hockey. To me, it was college hockey. So I was like, cool. And we're playing a game in St. Cloud State, Minnesota, at St. Cloud State. And we're playing the Division III school, St. John's. And I have the game, play really well, get a shutout. And after the game, the coach, Craig Dahl, says to me, why are you playing Division III college hockey? You should be playing Division I. And I was like, cool, how do I do that? And he says, you need to go back to juniors and play, if you can, play in the USHL. And I was like, cool. I actually got drafted by Omaha, but I didn't go because in Canada, I was like, what's the USHL? I had no idea. And so I quit school the next day. Coach was not very happy with me. But how bad do you want it? What are you willing to do to get to where you want to go? That was the lesson that I had learned from 9 to 11 to 13, and now at 18 years old, I quit college, which was a big risk because your college scholarship starts, your college time starts. And if I didn't get a scholarship the next year, essentially my career would have been over. But I went to Omaha and ended up getting a scholarship to play Division I college hockey. And so played at Huntsville, Alabama. This will become more important as we go, but at the end, I ended up doing well at Huntsville. Was an all-conference goaltender and All-American, set the record for most shutouts, 7 shutouts in the season. And not one single team even talked to me, not one pro team. And so I got on the phone and I started calling everywhere I could. AHL, ECHL, NHL. I even talked to Bob Hartley and John Tortorella. Nobody would let me come. But then I got a phone call from the Memphis River Kings in the Central Hockey League, and Memphis was on a 21-game losing streak. They were the worst team in pro hockey history. They were the only team that would let me come. And so I went there in my very first game. I made 55 saves, and we won 2-1 in a shootout against the Macon Whoopie. Hell of a name. And then in my second game, I played against Wichita, got a shutout. And then I ended up winning 5 out of the last 7 games of the season. And the coach, Dave Starman, if you guys ever watch the World Juniors, he's the guy who does the announcing for the World Juniors. He was my coach. And Dave was the radio for the Boston Bruins. And so he called the Boston Bruins, and I ended up signing with the Boston Bruins. And the next year I played in the American Hockey League. But ultimately, I ended up in the East Coast League. This is a picture of me in the East Coast League. And this is where things start to change a little bit, all right? Now, I didn't have any money to train. And at the time, this is when specialized training started. You know, there was hockey training sessions in the summertime, guys doing hockey-specific training. And again, I didn't have the money. I was in college. I didn't have any money. And so I started training myself. What I would do is I would go to these training sessions, I would watch them, and then I would go back and I would change them for myself. And I would do a lot of weird stuff. You know, I used to wear my glove and blocker in the gym, and then I would tape a 5-pound weight to my glove and blocker, and I'd sit there in the mirror and I would do these exercises. People probably thought I was crazy. I used to wear my goalie pads, and we had a hill by my house, and I would run up the hill sideways trying to work on my push so that I could get across the net faster. But I would do all these exercises, and that was a key pivotal moment for me because I was teaching myself how to be a goaltender and how to be better and how to be faster and how to be stronger. And so it was the first foray into teaching goaltending. All right. So I go on to play here, and now I have no money, but I got a degree in marketing. So what do? I start a goalie school. And as you can see, that's the picture of me playing. I just outlined it with a marker. That's the very first logo I ever made. I stole the lettering from Brian's. I wore Brian's goalie equipment. So I stole the logo from there and I made my very first goalie school. And after a few years in North America, I played in the American League, the IHL, I played in the ECHL, and I realized that no NHL team wanted me. No NHL team wants a 5'8" midget in net, right? So I decided to go over to Europe and play in Scotland. And this is the pivotal moment of my whole life, all right? This is where everything changed, because the first time in my life, I actually made money. I made enough money to have a wife. I had 2 kids. I was finally supporting myself. I was buying rental properties in Canada, and it was unbelievable. But we'd have these road trips where we would start in Scotland at 6 in the morning. We'd get on the bus and we'd drive down to London 8 hours. And so there's a lot of time to kill on your way to the game. We do this on game days and then get off the bus and play the game. So it was crazy, but it's crazy for the NHL. But so on these bus trips, I would build companies. And so the first company I built a company called One Stop Hockey. And One Stop Hockey was basically when you, before eBay, before Craigslist, I started when I did the goalie schools, the kids would come to the goalie schools and they were growing, right? So the parents would be buying new equipment. The kid would come to the goalie school with new equipment and then they'd want to sell the old equipment to other goalies. And sometimes it would work out, sometimes it wouldn't. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I build a website where everybody could sell equipment to each other? All the goalies could sell equipment to each other, and I did it for forwards as well. And they would create a community. Now, this is back in the day when you could charge a registration fee. So I would charge them $10. They'd get into the club, and then they could change equipment with people all around North America. And so one day I'm sitting on the couch in Scotland. This is the exact story. I'm sitting on the couch watching TV with my wife, and I get a phone call, and a guy by the name of Gordon McFarland says, "Is this Steve Briere?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I want to buy your company." And I was like, "What?" It totally blew me away. I was like, "Seriously?" He's like, "Yeah, how much do you want?" And so I literally look over to my wife. I'm like, "Hey, some guy wants to buy the One Stop Hockey." And she goes, I go, "How much do we want?" She goes, "Well, we want to buy this house and we need $40,000 of down payment." So I said, "I want $40,000. He said, "Sold." And he sent me a check the next day. So that's how I sold my first company. So now remember the name Gordon McFarland because it's going to be important as we go down the line. But the next thing I did is there was a guy on my team named Jason Daly. And Jason Daly was a captain of Cornell University, one of the smartest guys I ever played with. And Jason was a few years older than me. He retired my first year. And he came back the next year and he said to me, "Stevie, I'm selling a product called Dartfish." And anybody familiar with Dartfish? Yeah. Yeah, I figured more people over here. In North America, when I say Dartfish, they're like, "What?" But Dartfish was one of the first video editing softwares. They actually, like downhill skiing in the Olympics, when they have the red line and the blue line, when the skiers go around the, I don't even know what you call them, the poles on the way down. But anyways, so he introduced me to Dartfish. He said, "Stevie, I think it'd be really good for your goalie schools. You could film the kids at the goalie school. You can edit it and make marks and everything." And so he gave me a license to it. Now, again, very important part, but it'll come back later. So now I'm 32 years old. I've got a wife and 2 kids. And my wife says, "I think it might be time we retire." And so I decided to go back to university. And, well, what do you get a degree in entrepreneurship? Because I had started all these companies and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back and do entrepreneurship. And so I got a scholarship, you call it, or whatever. I was a graduate assistant at the University of Alabama, Huntsville. And my first goaltender was actually Cam Talbot. So pretty lucky, I got fortunate. But when I went to the university, I became the director of the Innovation Institute. And so what I would do is my job was to take, I would take patents from the university and I would create companies out of them. Or if a professor came in and he had an idea for a company, I would do the research and figure out whether we wanted to pay for the patent, and then we would own 7% of it. And then I would become the CEO of the company, and then I would help them get funding, whether it was angel investment, venture capital investment, or whether we would put them into an incubator, or whether we would take their license out the technology. So we did them all. I've done all of them. But at the same time, I volunteered with the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Anybody guess why? It was a free trip home to Scotland every year that I didn't have to pay for. So I would help students at the Edinburgh University that wanted to take their inventions and bring them back to North America. So every year at Christmas, we would fly over to Edinburgh. I would work with the students, and then I would help them license out their technology or just break into the market in North America. So again, I wrote on here elevator pitch so I wouldn't forget, so it's a good thing I wrote it down. But one of the things that I learned from this that I took away that's going to become a pivotal thing in my career is that when you build these companies, have anybody ever heard of an elevator pitch? Yeah? So you got 3 minutes. You got 3 minutes, basically they say when you get on the elevator to the bottom, to convince somebody to buy your product or invest in your company, right? And I got really good at this elevator pitch because when you're trying to get money, it takes a lot of elevator pitches to get the money, okay? But this, again, would become very important in my coaching. I got to be able to convince a goalie to do what I need him to do or that he doesn't necessarily want to do or not sure if he should do it. I got to be able to convince him in 3 minutes. And if I don't, usually it's going to take months before I convince him. So this is a really important thing, okay, the elevator pitch. But one of the companies, again, I'm only telling you this story along the way, but Alamanda Polymers was a gene and drug delivery company that I started, a biotech company, and I became the CEO of this company, and it was our first exit. So this was the first time that I built a biotech company and then successfully exited. And it gave us enough money for my wife and kids and I to not need to work for a little while. Again, this is important because if anybody that's a coach here knows that when you're starting out, you usually don't make a lot of money. You're bordering being poor. And it was no different for us. I wanted to be a coach, but the reality was I wasn't willing to sacrifice my family for coaching. I have the most amazing wife in the world. 20 years married and 25 years together, and there's no way I would ever sacrifice my wife or my kids for coaching. And so this was the springboard that allowed us to chase coaching. So while we were doing that, we're living in Alabama, right? So it's pretty tough to have an ice rink. There's one rink in Huntsville, Alabama, and it's pretty tough to get ice time. And so I built a training facility out of synthetic ice. Now, this isn't a big deal. I won Entrepreneur of the Year for this and built a roller hockey and ice rink in the back of a Piggly Wiggly grocery store. So not very good real estate, but that's all right. And the reason this became important is because I sold the company when we decided that we were going to leave. I sold the company. And a guy from Boston, Massachusetts drove down with a moving truck all the way down, 26 hours down to Alabama, and took it apart screw by screw. 600 screws, I could tell you, in the rink part, in the synthetic ice rink. But he took it apart, and when I was training goalies there, it was really cool because it was my rink. I could do whatever I wanted. And so I had all these training tools. I take mirrors. I had mirrors, big, huge, massive mirrors, and I had them on rollers. And I had a frame around it, and I could wheel it in front of the kids so that when they did a butterfly, they could see instantly what they were looking at. Were their hands back? Were they in front? Were their pads coming together? They could see it instantly. One of the other ones I did was I had, you guys ever see those Taibo kickboxing dummies? Okay, so I had the dummy in front of the kids to work on screens. And the guy who bought it built houses. So he came down to build it, and take it apart, sorry. And when he came down, he looked at my dummy. He's like, hey, I can build you a better one. And he built me these screen dummies with legs, and they look like hockey players. This is the very first one ever built. This is the first prototype. It's pretty ugly, but that was the very first one. So, and you guys will see this as we go. But the next thing I did was I got a mentor. And when my second contract in the NHL was with the Nashville Predators, and I played for Cincinnati in the East Coast League, and I worked for a goalie coach named Mitch Korn. Anybody ever heard of Mitch Korn? Yeah, Mitch is like the godfather of goalie coaching, okay? He's been in the NHL for 32 years, I think it is now. And he's probably the most amazing teacher of goaltending and very limited playing, but he's an amazing communicator and thinker. And so I would go to Nashville every game day. I did this 100% for free. There was no pay. I wasn't an employee of Nashville. I was simply a fly on the wall. And I would drive up to Nashville. It was an hour and a half away. And every day I would sit down on game days with Mitch, and we would go through morning skate. We'd watch video. He'd teach me how to do the pre-scouts of the other team. He would walk through why he did what he did in the mornings. And then we would watch hockey all afternoon. It was unbelievable. We would just sit there in the coach's room. We'd watch old games from the 60s and 70s, and we'd talk about goaltending. We'd talk about ideas. And the first idea we came on was reaction time. When we're coaching and when we're goalies, we always do things that are audio. We blow a whistle. That means stop, right? We yell at them, go. We tell the goalies, move this way, move that way. But the reality is most of hockey for a goalie is visual. And so we were like, well, how could we create something where the goalies had to move? So our first thing we did is we built a randomizer with Christmas lights on a door. And we cut all these little holes and we put Christmas lights in, and you would turn it on and the lights would light up. And what we found was it didn't work. It was shit. Because you couldn't control how fast the lights lit up. You couldn't control the time. It would just constantly be on, and it was way too fast. The goalies, and the distance wasn't far enough. The goalie would just be like, oh yeah, this is easy. And so I remembered my students from Edinburgh University. So back in Edinburgh, this is Ralph Kleinert. Ralph had invented these cones for gym class in Scotland. And these cones had a remote control. And so you could put the cones anywhere you wanted, any positions you wanted, any distance apart, but then they had a randomizer on it. So you could do the time between the lights, you could set for 1 second, 2 seconds, all the way up to 10 seconds. And then you could do the duration of how long you wanted the drill to go. And so we took these cones and then we were using them for training the goalies. And it ended up being an amazing piece of technology. Now they're everywhere. I mean, fit lights, and there's all kinds of these everywhere. But this was the very first one. This is back in like 2010, I think. And so a really funny story for you guys, but I'm working with Nashville, and we just finished playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, and me and Mitch are at practice, and the team after us was the San Jose Sharks. And Niemi was hurt. And so they needed a goalie for practice. And my roommate from college, Jay Woodcroft, who ended up coaching the Edmonton Oilers, who could end up being a coach here soon, he was the assistant coach. So Jay calls me, he's like, hey, Stevie, can you be the goalie for practice? I was like, yeah, sure, I just retired, I'm okay, I can play. So I go in net for practice, and I meet Wayne Thomas. And Wayne was the goalie coach for San Jose, but he was also the general manager for the AHL team in Worcester. Now, if anybody knows American maps, San Jose is on this side, Worcester is the complete opposite side, okay? And so he was 2 weeks on as the goalie coach, 2 weeks on as the general manager. And in the 2 weeks that he was gone, Corey Schwab would come from Seattle, and he would be the goalie coach for San Jose. And so they had 9 goalies in their system, Niittymaki and Hari Satari and Tyson Sexsmith and Thomas Heemskirk. And then they had goalies in the OHL. They had 9 goalies in their system. Entrepreneur, video. I said to Wayne, can I be your assistant? And he said, well, how's that going to work? I took the video of every single goalie in their organization. I would download it onto my computer. I would take the Dartfish and I would edit out all the puck touches. And then I would put them online so Wayne and Corey could see every single touch of the goalies and then make comments and then go over it with the goalies from anywhere in the world at any time. So basically I became a glorified video coach for goalies. And that was my first job in the NHL. That's how I broke in. And so I used the Dartfish. This is an example. I'd go in and I would mark it all up, and then it would give those are the games, and then I'd go through. And by halfway through the season, they would have me go through the clips with the goalies. So this was my first job in the NHL. So I was an assistant with San Jose for 2 years. And then we had sold the Alamanda Polymers. I was working in the NHL. And so I said to myself, now's the time. Now my family, we could move, we could do something for ourselves and immerse ourselves in goalie coaching. I was going for it. Hell or high water, I was going to be a goalie coach in the NHL. So I moved to Minnesota and we bought our dream house in a dream town. We live in a small little town of 10,000 people right on the water. It's a little piece of heaven. We've been there ever since. We love it there. Stillwater, Minnesota. If you guys ever want to come, give me a call. Love to show you around. But we built a hockey academy there for goalies only. And this was the first kind of goalies only. Everybody told me it couldn't be done. How would you get shooters, so on and so forth. But I built the very first goalie academy. And this was an entire school year, 8 hours a day, 3 hours for each group, 2 hours for the youngest kids. And then they would go to school the rest of the day upstairs in the arena. Now this was amazing because it was like a goalie factory. We had 35 goalies from all around the world. We had goalies from Russia, from Sweden. We had goalies from Australia, all around North America. And they would come and live with us. We had 5 of them in our basement. But we built this goalie academy, and it was like a factory. We could do whatever we wanted. It was unbelievable because any invention like those dummies, we had the dummies, right? Well, one of the problems with the dummy is the dummy just stands there. In a game, the screen doesn't just stand there, the screen moves. Well, then we were like, well, why don't we put ropes on it? So we started tying ropes to the dummies, and then one coach would pull it this way, the other coach would pull it this way. Sometimes we'd pull it from the net out at the defenseman when he's shooting. All these experiments that we wanted to try. Or we used to call it Mythbusters. You guys ever heard of a show called Mythbusters? They have a scientific thing they want to prove, and then the whole show they prove that one experiment. Well, we would call it goalie Mythbusters, okay? So people would say things like, well, you got to stand up. Well, we'd say, okay, well, let's try it. You're only allowed to stand up. And then we would check out the stats, and we'd keep track of the stats. We'd say, okay, well, the reverse is the best position in this particular play. Well, let's try it. And we had all the time in the world to experiment with everything, okay? We experimented with all kinds of different gadgets and all kinds of stuff I don't want to bore you with, but this was the beginning of my building business plans for goalies, okay? And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just remember, I started building business plans for goalies, okay? Another really cool invention was one day I'm driving my son to Ames Arena in Lakeville, Minnesota. He has a little hockey practice, and I look next door, and there's a McDonald Eye Care. And Mitch and I, back when I was in Nashville, we had thought, well, we train the goalies' muscles, we train their flexibility, we train their mind, but we never train their eyes. And so I went into McDonald Eye Care, and I said, hey, do you guys ever think about doing sports vision? And his eyes lit up. Tony McDonald's eyes lit up. And he was like, I have a master's degree in sports science. And so we created the first, one of the first. I believe there was one other company in California, Slow the Game Down, that was the first one. But we created a sports vision training program. Now, 20 of the teams in the NHL use them. Almost everybody in Minnesota goes to them. They have an entire facility, bigger, twice the size of this, and it's all vision training. And I'll get into that later. But the first goalie we ever did it with was Pekka Rinne. And then Pekka Rinne and Carter Hutton, and then they both went on to do very, very good success. Obviously, Pekka was up for the Vezina. The very next year, Mitch went to Washington. He brought Braden Holtby. Braden Holtby won the Vezina. And the next year, Devin Dubnyk came, and Devin Dubnyk was up for the Vezina. Now, I'm not saying it's because of the vision training. That's just a coincidence, maybe. But the point is that everybody started buying into needing to work on their eyes just as much as the other parts of their body. So this was another thing. So as I'm doing the academy, I'm coaching goalies 3 hours a day, each group, 8 hours a day, an entire school year. I think about it now and I'm like, how the hell did I ever do that? I have no idea. I shot every single puck for 8 hours a day. I can hit a spot 10 in a row, no problem. Jess is in the back there. She can attest. I can hit any spot I want. I'm a better skater too than you would give me credit for. But anyways, I would do that. And then in the summer times, I do the goalie schools. And then I started coaching junior teams, okay? And so I was coaching teams in the USHL, the North American League, Saskatchewan, all over. I was coaching 6 teams at once. So I was coaching goalies an entire school year. Then I was coaching goalies the entire summer. And then I was coaching junior goalies on the weekends. I did this for 6 years. I was doing goaltending 365 days a year, all day, every day. That's why I have an amazing wife. So how do you coach 6 teams at once? Well, I used that video software where I would download all the kids' games. I would break it out and I would go to it. Because one weekend I would go to this team and then I would download all the video from the other teams and I would go through the video with the goalies. Then I would go to the next team and then I would do all the other goalies. And I created this Excel spreadsheet. Now, I know you guys are thinking genius, but I didn't build it. Some guy who's really good at Excel built it, but I gave him the idea. And so I built this Excel spreadsheet, and everywhere you mark the shots, and then whenever there's a goal, you just put a G, and then it puts it up here in the spots. Okay, and I could keep track of the goals. And then this is an important part. You see on this side, you see could have, should have, and no chance. All right, and I'll explain that as we go, but really key as well there. Rebound control, puck touches, all right? And I could keep track of all of that just by putting different letters on my Excel spreadsheet. And at the end of the Excel spreadsheet, it would create a cumulative total. And this is just an example. Don't get too caught up on the numbers. But I would grade A, like a goalie could be really good, but he had no grade A shots. Maybe you're overemphasizing how good he was. But I would have all of the different saves, and then I would have cumulatively what happened. Now, there's products like this now. Like, I think a couple of years after I built this company called Double Blue, I used them for a little while, but I couldn't manipulate it the way I wanted. And so to this day, I still use my Excel spreadsheet because I can change things on the Excel spreadsheet the way I want to do it, the way my brain works, the way I want to express it to the goalies. But this was an example of the Excel spreadsheets. So when I was coaching these goalies from a distance, I was doing all the video, so I had all their video, and then I was able to keep track of how they were doing just by doing the Excel spreadsheet. So, next thing, I have 6 goalies coaching in the NHL, playing in juniors, and all 6 of my goalies get drafted. So my 6th year of doing this, all 6 of my goalies get drafted in the NHL. And I get a phone call one day from a guy named Garth Malarchuk. And Garth comes to me, he says, Stevie, I want to know about Matteo Tomek. And I tell him about Matteo. And then he says, I want to know about Jack LaFontaine. I tell him about Jack LaFontaine. Do I want to know about Ryan Bednard? I tell him about Ryan Bednard. He's like, how the hell do you have 6 goalies on the NHL draft prospects list? And I told him how I coached. I told him all my spreadsheets and all this stuff that I did and the dummies and the toys and blah, blah, blah. And he said, you should be the goalie coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I was like, yeah, right. I thought he was full of shit. And then 2 minutes later, I get a phone call from Kyle Dubas. He said, Stevie, you're coming to Toronto on Thursday. And so, I was beside myself. I was ecstatic. I was in my office there. I'm just like cheering and stuff. And then I get a phone call on Sunday from Kyle, and he says, Stevie, I'm not going to be able to bring you to Toronto. We just hired a coach, and he might already have his own goalie coach. So then I start crying. And no. The next morning, I see on the ticker tape on the bottom, Toronto Maple Leafs hire Mike Babcock. And I had coached the Fargo Force in USHL and Mike Babcock's son, Michael, played for us. And he was always my shooter on the goalies. He didn't have the best hands. He was the hardest worker, not the best hands. So he would come and work with me to work on his shooting. And so I said, Michael, your dad need a goalie coach? He's like, yeah, I need to be perfect. So he gives me his dad's cell phone number. And I swear to God, I'm in the bleachers at my son's baseball game. I call, it goes to voicemail. I go, Mike, this is Steve Briere. I'm your goalie coach for the 2015 season. And I hung up. And then like 20 seconds later, Mike Babcock called me back and he goes, oh, fuck, I've never heard that before. He goes, give me a reference. I said, Mitch Corn, give me his phone number. Gave him his phone number, hung up on me. It was literally like 10 seconds. And then like half an hour goes by and all of a sudden I get a phone call back from Babs and he goes, all right, you're coming to Toronto on Thursday. Don't fuck it up. And I hung up. So again, sorry for the swearing, but just adds to the story, right? So anyways, when I got ready for the interview, every goalie coach I was interviewing got one game. You got a game of Reimer and a game of Bernier. And back to the beginning when I said, how bad do you want it? What are you willing to do to separate yourself from other people? How bad do you want to learn? How bad do you want to outwork? How bad do you want it? So what I did is I called the NHL. And I talked to a guy by the name of Adam Gentlewich, and I thank him all the time to this day whenever I see him. And I said, I want every single goal ever scored on James Reimer and Jonathan Bernier, their entire career. And it was like 1,500 goals, so it was a lot of video. But I stayed up for 3 days. 3 days I had Red Bull and coffee and nothing else. Did not leave my office. And I did every single goal they ever scored, and I used my Excel spreadsheet. And I went through and I marked every single goal, where it was on the ice, where it went in on the net, was the guy a lefty or righty, and I created this whole matrix. And all I did was go through every clip and then I would just mark with an X, all the things, like all the matrix, right? Of like, was it a one-timer? Was it a cross ice? Was it a pass out? Was it a breakaway? Where did they score on the net? All right. And I would go through every single goal on both goalies and it created a heat map for me. And then at the same time, I listened to every one of Babs's interviews to see what kind of a person this guy was. Like, how was I going to impress this guy? And really, I think you guys all know, but Babs is a no bullshit kind of guy, just straight to the point. And so, all right. So now I'm getting ready for the interview. I'm the night before and I start sweating profusely because I'm like, I got a PC. What if my PC doesn't fit their TVs? Or what if they don't have a screen? Which is silly, really silly. But I didn't know. I'd never been in the NHL. And so I went to the store to Best Buy and I bought a mini pocket projector. It was like this big. It was a tiny little projector. And then I get the projector. It works. It's great. And now I start panicking. My wife, I'm practicing this at the house, my speech and everything. And then all of a sudden I'm like, shit. What if they don't have a screen that I can project it on? So I go to Office Depot and I buy a piece of paper 8 feet long, 4 feet wide. And now at 11 o'clock at night, the night before I fly out, my wife and I have duct tape and we're duct taping the back of the paper because we're like, well, what if it rips on the way? And it was pretty funny. But anyways, I'm walking through the airport and I got this 8-foot piece of paper and I show up to the office and I go downstairs and the video coach says to me, what the hell is that? And I said, that's my projector. And you know what's really funny is Babs walks out of the shower. He's got a towel on only. And he goes, Brew, leave him alone. This is his fucking interview. He can do whatever he wants. Stevie, you do whatever you want. And so I took all the tables in the room and I made this circle and I put my projector, my thing. And years later, I asked Babs why he gave me the job. And he said, because you're a projector screen. And said, anybody who wanted the job that bad was willing to do that, you know. He was the guy I wanted. So Babs, to his credit, he went through every single clip. He could not believe that I had done it. So what I did is when he walked in, he goes, so how are you going to fix my goaltending? He's an intimidating guy. And he's like, so how are you going to fix my goaltending? And I said, 6 inches. And he's like, bullshit. You know, he's like, these guys aren't good enough. You know, how are you going to fix them? I said, 6 inches. He says, how'd you come up with that? And I showed him my Excel spreadsheet and my heat map and how I went through every single goal. And he was like, no way you went through every single goal. and you went through every single game they played? And I said, yeah. And he sat me down and he went through every single clip. 5 hours. He went through every single clip and he went through my business plan of goaltending. And then at the end of it, he goes, we're not done yet. I'm going for dinner at 6 o'clock. I'll pick you up at the hotel. But I knew I had the job. Because I was like, anybody spends 6 hours with you, like, you're in. So I come out of Bay Street and I yell, yeah! I was like, I knew I got it. I was like, I'm in. But that night he takes me out for dinner in an Italian restaurant in Yorkville, and some guy's sitting there. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Like, he's a little short, fat, bald guy. And he's like, sits me down with him. And he goes, this is Wally Hunter. He's a venture capitalist in Toronto. And Wally Hunter is now on the board of directors for the NHL Coaches Association. And he starts grilling me. How many shares did you do for Alamanda Polymers? Why did you do that many shares? What was on your board of directors? Who had voting shares? Who had voting rights? What were the stipulations? And I'm like, full hour of grilling me about business. Babs wanted to make sure that I wasn't bullshitting him on my background of being an entrepreneur and a master's degree and stuff. And so I went to go pee, and Babs goes, is he telling the truth? And Wally said, yeah, he's good. So then that's how I got the job in Toronto. So, but again, some of those things are things that I learned from when I was a kid, right? How bad do you want it? What are you willing to do to get to where you want to go? And then thinking outside the box is another big one I want you guys, like everything I did was thinking outside the box, right? I didn't take the normal path of goalie coaching. I didn't think about things the same way as everybody. And the academy really helped me to be able to test things out. You know, we have theories, we have thoughts. I would be able to take my theories and thoughts on goaltending and experiment with them and try them. And so all of these things led to going to Toronto. And then, so I got the job, and then I used them all in Toronto. People don't even know who I am in the NHL. They're like, oh, you're the guy with the dummies. But yeah, 16 teams in the NHL have the dummies now. The guy who built them for me started a whole company and sells them. It's a tough company to have. There's no resale. Those things are almost unbreakable. They're made with steel rebar. They weigh like 200 pounds, but they're pretty awesome. And then the vision training, there's Freddie using the vision. And you don't need to see the video on that. And this is just this is another invention that this is a high school teacher in Bemidji, Minnesota, came, and I used to use ropes all the time, and I would tie it to the hockey stick to show the goalies their angles. And so this high school teacher, science teacher, came and he invented the BFF, the goalie BFF, Eric Niskanen. And so I would put pucks on the ropes. These are foam pucks, and it slides up the ropes so that the goalies could see their angles and see about tracking down, to see how much they needed to have their shoulders over to track the puck, and to see their depth of where they needed to be. So I would use these and so now failure. I want to tell you guys about failure. All I've done is talk about success and the path up. So my first year in the NHL, first game in the NHL. Anybody know about the Toronto-Montreal rivalry? It's the first game of the year in Toronto every year. It's the biggest rivalry in hockey. We're playing the Montreal Canadiens. This is my very first day, guys. Very first game on the job. We're 1-1. Now, keep in mind, we were supposed to be shitty. We were trying to get Austin Matthews. So keep that in mind in the background. But we play the first game. The score is 1-1. We go into the third period. Max Pacioretty shoots the puck, hits Jonathan Bernier in the shoulder, goes way up in the air. Nobody knows where it is. Bernie doesn't know where it is. It hits him in the back, rolls in, and we lose the game 2-1. And the next morning, we get called into Babs' office. He's like, hey, I want to see you and Bernie in my office. First day, I already got called into the coach's office. So we sit down, and Babs starts berating Bernie. And why are you a mental midget? And he's going down the line. He's just giving it to him. How come you're so weak? How come Carey Price, when the score was 1-1, he sacked up and made the big saves, and you let in the shitty goal? And he's on and on. And I'm thinking to myself, holy smokes, this is the way it is in the NHL? Like, this is tough. And I wasn't equipped with how to save Bernie. I didn't know how to insulate Bernie. And so I let him go through that. And, I talked to him and stuff like that after, and forget about it, don't worry about it, let's just go, blah, blah. And a couple games later, we play against the Buffalo Sabres. We're down 5-on-3. Bernie makes a stack the pad save. Between the first and second period, Bernie's in the dressing room, Babs comes in, he starts berating him. What are you stacking the pads? This isn't 1985. All you had to do is do like Steve talks about, get your shoulders over and track it and slide over. You don't need to stack the pads. Well, we lost Bernie after that. He was done. He lost 20 games in a row. He lost 10 the year before I was there, and then he lost his first 10 starts that year. And I failed miserably. I wasn't equipped with the information and the knowledge of how to save him, how to get him back and to get him over the hump, how to forget about it. And I get emotional thinking about it because I really hurt him. And for years, I see Bernie all the time, give him a great big hug and a kiss and tell him I love him and that I screwed up. And he's like, no, you didn't. Don't worry about it. Like he doesn't care. But in my eyes, I screwed up really bad. Basically, I would say in a roundabout way, his career kind of fizzled out after that. But I really did. That was a huge failure. Now, for Reimer that year, worked out really well. Reimer was #1 in the NHL for a while. They ended up 7th in the NHL. We traded him for 2 third-round picks to San Jose. And Lou Lamoriello gave me a new contract. So there was some good and positive, but the biggest thing of all is I really failed on this part of things.
One question there. What could you have done there with your knowledge now?
Well, now that's what I'm going to get to, is how I fixed it and how I got there. So what the NHL, one of the things they do in Toronto that's really cool, and guys, let me know if I'm running on time. I'll speed it up a little bit. But Toronto Maple Leafs do a thing where they give you $15,000 a year continuing education, where you can go and learn about what you want to learn about. Come to a conference like this, so on and so forth. I picked the mental side of the game. So I went away to all kinds of conferences on the mental side of the game. Sports psychologist. You guys ever heard of Michael Gervais, Finding Mastery? I met with him, flew out and met all kinds of different, the wrestling coach at Penn State. I listened to different podcasts, TEDx talks. I read 1 million books, and I immersed myself 100% for an entire next 3 years on the mental side of the game. I met with Maria Mountain, who is with Hockey Canada, sports psychologist. And what I did with these books is I went through and I would glean through and I would put all my cliff notes together. And so this is part of my coaching. So like an example, this is a book that I read, and I would go through and I would take the key points out of it, all right? And I would save it in the library. And then remember Gord McFarlane that bought my company in the UK, the One Stop Hockey? Well, Gord is a certified disc trainer. Now, disc, people can look at it different ways and, take away what you want, doesn't matter. I take away is it's an easy way to get to know the kids really quick. And I call them kids, but the goalie's really fast. Okay, so like Joey's a DI, he's very direct. Really, really, if you guys have ever seen interviews with Joey, he's like really gregarious, very, very energetic. He loves life. He's bouncing around all over the place, but he's also very direct. If I tell him to do something, he's just like, he wants to know what to do and just do it. But Freddie Anderson is a complete opposite of Joey. Freddie walks into the rink every day. He's like, okay, George. And then, Freddie, we're going to work on pass outs today. Well, is the guy in front of the net a lefty or is he a righty? Is there a defenseman over here? Is there a defenseman up there? Where's the winger at? And he wants to know everything. He's a very analytical guy, okay? So when I'm teaching Freddie, I can't just say, hey, we're doing pass outs. I have to say we're doing pass outs in this situation. The puck went low to high, and then it came back down the wall. They cycled it, blah, 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 blah. And he needs to know all those details, and then he's good. He'll do the drill till the cows come home. Joey, he doesn't want to know all those details. He's just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And so it was just a quick snapshot to be able to learn the goalies. This is a little video I want to play for you guys here.
What does it take to do the impossible? What does it take to achieve paradigm shifting, never seen before breakthroughs. As I mentioned earlier, it is technically defined as an optimal state of consciousness, one where we feel our best and we perform our best. Is that flow is definable, that flow is universal. When we end up in the deep now and time gets shut down in a flow state, anxiety disappears. Your stress hormones flood out of your system. We move into flow. We take in more information per second, so data acquisition goes up. We pay more attention to that information, so salience goes up. We find faster connections between that incoming information and older ideas, so pattern recognition goes up. What we now know is that flow states are hackable. But the first thing you need to know is the most obvious. Flow follows focus. It can only show up when all of our attention is focused in the right here, the right now. I have to explain this number, 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. So that is the amount of time it took Roger Bannister to run the world's first 4-minute mile. But Roger Bannister runs the first 4-minute mile, and then a month later, somebody breaks his record. A couple months later, somebody else breaks his record. In fact, within 10 years, teenagers had broken that record. So you gotta ask yourself, how is that possible? This is known to researchers as the Bannister effect. And what it really is an extremely tight coupling between the mind and the body, right? You have to believe you are capable of achieving the impossible before you can actually achieve the impossible.
That's like a 30-minute video. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too much and you got the point. But I started studying flow. Again, this is my second year in the NHL, so this is 10 years ago already. But everybody here, I've heard it in people's speeches already about flow. And so flow became a really big part of my coaching. And even to this day, it's a really big part of my coaching. And I'll explain to you how I go about getting my goalies in flow. And now I'm going to start working a little bit more of how I do things in the NHL.
What is it?
Oh, sorry. So we all know the chemicals. I'm not going to go through them. The chemicals that create happiness. But the point of them, I just want to go through is that we all know dopamine, you need to have a goal, right? Basically, at the end of the day, it's having a goal and achieving the goal, all right? And setting goals for the season, like I'm going to win the Vezina Trophy, is a great goal. It's an unbelievable goal. Or win the Stanley Cup, great goal. But the problem is you only get that satisfaction at the very end. And so how do you keep goalies every single day coming back and being excited? And so then it's working your way backwards. But then endorphins, right? We all know those only come out when you work hard. If you don't work hard enough, you don't get the endorphins. If it's not a challenge hard enough, you don't get the endorphins, right? The runner's high. And then the oxytocin, being the leader, and then serotonin being the teammate, being a great teammate. And this is a part of things that, I think in the past we didn't talk about as much as with goalies. It's kind of like ever since you're a kid, when you're 8 years old, the coach is running practice like, yeah, just take the goalie off into the corner, And in the dressing room, I've had coaches do this to me. I remember 13 years old playing AAA hockey. We've got a playoff game, and my coach says to me, you get dressed over there by myself in my own dressing room. Okay, now at the time I was like, oh, this is cool. I got the whole dressing room to myself, But what a silly thing to do. Like basically you're not part of the team. Just go over here and be by yourself, okay? And so total opposite, right? Again, articles, things like this article is one of my favorite ones. You got 86,400 seconds in a day. And, I'm not going to waste your time on that. The other thing I did is, again, my entrepreneurial background, I had a guy that I knew that built apps. So I built an app on daily mindset. Okay, so it's all these exercises and things they can do, whether they want to do journaling, they want to do gratitude, all of these exercises, there's like 15 different exercises. Then there's resources for each one of the exercises. And I created an app. Because anybody ever worked in the NHL, it's really hard to get to the players because they walk in at 9 o'clock, they go right away into the trainer's room, they get a massage, they go into the gym, they get their workout in, then they get dressed like 5 minutes before the ice, you get on the ice and boom, you're working your way. So trying to get a hold of the goalies to actually do these exercises so that we're working on their mindset every day is really tough. So I created this app because then they could have it wherever they wanted. they would just grab out of their phone, oh shit, I got to do my mental strengthening. So I created this whole program called mental strengthening. Okay, so like when we work out, when do we work out? We work out before we're injured so that we don't get injured. The mind is no different than any other muscle in the body. If we want to take care of it, we got to exercise it and strengthen it before we get injured. What I learned from Jonathan is that by the time I was trying to help him, he was already injured. He was already injured. It was almost impossible to try to get him to do some of the mental exercises because he was a broken man. And then what I discovered is that it's more about the work you do before so that you never get to that situation. And I'm really proud of that. If any of you guys feel like it, I mean, I don't know how nerdy you are like me, but you can look at every goalie in my entire career. I've had a top 10 goalie every year in the NHL, okay? And then I credit that purely to this exercise of mental strengthening. Because we'll have bad games. I mean, Jack Campbell was an all-star for me in Toronto. He had lots of bad games, but he would have one bad game and be able to bounce back. Whereas with Jonathan, I wasn't able to get him on, and he had 10 bad games. You have 10 bad games in the NHL, somebody's going to get fired. All right? So along the way, then my game day preparation changed. So this would just be an example. This was years ago. I would take a quote from a guy, and I would take that quote and how do I relate it to the goal that we had as a staff, as a goalie and coach relationship, okay? And then as we would go, I would create a plan. So this would be like their dopamine hit, right? Of having a plan and a goal that they can control. Has nothing to do with who we play, has nothing to do, these are things that they control, that they are their keywords. They create this. It's different for every goalie that I coach. Then some of them are the same, but most of them are different. This is Jack Campbell's, okay? And this never, ever changes. Every single game of the season, all 60 whatever games he played for me that year, this was the same, okay? This was his plan. When he does these things and controls these things, he was one of the best goalies in the NHL. And the way that I always prove it to everybody is I say, well, Jack Campbell never played in the NHL on a regular basis till he came to us in Toronto. And then he left Toronto and he's never ever played in the NHL. Okay? We were able to get him to play well every day by having his plan and his goal and what was important to him. Okay? My practice plans. This is the way I develop my plans. I don't care. You guys could steal it. Doesn't matter. But I built it so that I kept the mindset practice. Every day I make sure, this is a reminder for me, to make sure that I'm working on one part of the mind for these goalies, okay? And I'll keep going. Sorry, do you guys need it up there again? I see a lot of phones taking pictures. Okay, so in here, one of the things I would talk about, Thomas, you were talking about with yesterday at the goalie coaching, unpredictability, okay? So I started doing that a couple years ago, but I put it in there just to remind myself every day about unpredictability. So every single day, I have to have one of the practice mindsets, and then those are the technical departments that I work on every day. And then I make sure I hit them and I write them out, okay? So every day, every single day, I do puck touches, some sort of puck touch, unpredictability, reads, save selection, and skating, okay? And then throughout the season, now I'll get into some of the coaching with the goalie coach and the coach. So coaches are emotional. I get it. I 100% understand. This year was one of the hardest years I've ever had in coaching. It's the first time I've been on a last year of my contract, and you don't know if you're coming or going. You don't know. The team wasn't very good. Every day you're under pressure to win. Thankfully, our goaltender was really good. Joey played amazing. Top 10 goalie in the league. Now playing for USA in the World Championships. But as you're going through this season, this would happen to me all the time. And it doesn't matter, whether it was Babs, whether it was Kiefer, whether it's Dan, whether it's Hack, they get emotional during a game. Goalie lets in a goal they think is questionable. They come in and motherfuck you. They're just like, what the fuck, you're goalie, right? And like, it's stressful. I'll be honest with you, I can remember Freddie Anderson letting in a dead angle goal in Boston. and I still hold to this. It was the day that they switched the pants in the NHL. They used to be square. So when you went into a post load, it would make a square here, okay? And they changed them to round. And so the puck squeaked in. And Babs came in and he goes, your goalie ever lets that in, you'll be calling a fucking moving truck. And I was like, holy smokes, like, Jesus, this is tough. But what I learned from that is I could use my could've, should've, and no chance goals. And so what I do now with the coaches every 5 games, I have the coaches go through the goals. I don't let them see what I marked, but I have them tell me, and I say, no comment. You tell me what you think of the goals. I could tell you in 13 years in the NHL, I have never, ever, ever had the coach be harder on the goalie than the goalie is on himself. Every single coach, they look at the goal after and they're like, yeah, he had no chance there. I don't really know what he could have done. But meanwhile, in the game, they're like, you piece of crap, Steve, you're the goalie. He's screaming at me. So my way of fixing it was just take it, let it go. You're the sounding board for the coach. Your job is to let the coach vent to you, protect your goalie from that. I don't ever let the coaches talk to the goalie. Never. Because the coaches cannot help themselves. You can't. I'm telling you, 13 years, I've never seen a coach be able to handle himself with the goalies. They have no idea what to say, and they always end up, at the end, the goalie walks away going, what the flip just happened? All right? So I protect the goalies. I don't let the coaches talk to them. Francois Allaire taught me that. I went for lunch with him in Colorado, and he's like, you got to be the protector. You have to be the insulator from the coaches. And when we talked about the Hanu talked about that yesterday in the goalie talk, but I agree 100%. So I do this exercise during the season, and like I said, usually the coaches are always way easier on the goalie, but then what it does is it gives the goalie some reprieve. Then the coach doesn't want to talk to the goalie after because he's like, oh, okay, yeah, he really didn't have any chance. All right? And I could go on and on about that, but I try to speed it up here to finish off. So at the end of the season, I make this all out of my Excel spreadsheet. I go through and create this spreadsheet. And what I do, usually I spend most of my time here in the could-haves. I mean, the no chance, it's usually no chance, right? So there's probably no use worrying about that. The should-haves usually are, it's just a mistake, whatever. He just missed it. He usually would have had it. And then I create a plan for him. So then I'd go through all those clips, and then I would create a summer plan for the goalies. And most of the time, the goalies end up coming to see me, and we go through the plan in the summer, and they usually come and spend time with me, and we go through it and get ready. So workflow, I'm just going to spend 5 minutes here, go through my workflow for you guys to bring all this together of everything I've learned and everything I've done and how I put it together on a daily workflow. So this is my laptop. It's my laptop right now. But you'll see up in the top left, you'll see the pregame goalie meetings. Originally, I showed you guys that sheet, right, with the things that they do well. I give them an inspiring quote. Then I show them the steps that they need to do. Well, that turned into a video. So where do I get that video? In the second thing you'll see, so here's a video from Montreal Canadiens getting ready to play against Montreal Canadiens. And I tell the coaches, I say, hey, when you see the goal that's the same, let me know. And we'll clip it out and we'll put them together. And we'll make a package. I have yet to have a coach be like, oh, that's the same goal. It doesn't happen. So when you're coaching the goalie, a goal that he let in, that isn't going to happen for another 10, 15 games, you're coaching from behind instead of looking forward. When a goalie lets in a goal, what do we tell him? Next shot. Forget about it, right? But yet we spend the next 2 days reminding him of the shitty goal he let in and how we're going to fix it. So I don't ever do that anymore. To me, it's coaching from behind instead of coaching moving forward. So instead, what I do is, as the goalies play the season, I go through every single save they make. Doesn't matter. Every single save. And I categorize it after every game. Okay? So then when I'm putting together a meeting, or if they let in a bad goal, instead of showing them the goal against, I'll show them the exact same scenario, the exact same play, and I'll show them making the save. And then I'll say, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Perfect it. Okay? So that's where I get my video for it. So here's a workflow as you go through. So up in the season, up there, you'll see like DAC, goals against, playing the puck, saves, shootout. And then the goals against usually is for me, just to know what I want to work on and what I'm thinking. But then I'll go through playing the puck and saves. As you go through, then we go into pre-scouts. So I'm doing a pre-scout against St. Louis. Then I'll go through all the power play goals and then all the goals against, and I'll create. No different. Everybody knows about this, so I'm not going to waste any time. But what this has led me to is the next thing that I do and what I'm in charge of is goal scoring. So it started with Sheldon Keefe. He was like, look, Stevie, you're looking at every single goal scored ever in the NHL, and you've been doing it for years and years. How do we score more goals? So I started creating goal scoring projects. Okay? And then I would give them to the head coach, and they could use it the way they want. But I've become more working with the coaches. Now, this is an important thing because I've done this experiment. I've done the experiment where I went to the rink and never said a single word, and not one person ever talked to me. The reality is the goalie coach is the same as when you're 8 years old. They're just like, oh, he's the goalie coach. And so if you don't put yourself in and you want to learn about power play, you want to learn about breakouts, you want to learn about forechecking, they would literally let you just sit in the corner and just worry about the goalies. It's a safety net for the coaches, I find. If they don't know anything about goaltending and they don't know about the goaltender, then it's somebody to blame on. And I'll give you an example. John Tortorella just got fired this year. What did he say in his press conference why he got fired? Because of goaltending. It's like their safety valve. Bruce Boudreau gets fired from the Minnesota Wild. Why did he get fired? Because of his goaltending. Okay, it's like this default thing of, well, I don't know anything about goaltending, and that's their department, and now it gives me an out. It's their fault. They don't want to know. So what I've done is I become involved in everything we do. I know all our breakouts. I know all our neutral zone. I know our forechecks. I know our D zone. I know the PK. I work with Jess. You're going to see an amazing presentation from Jess. Her slides are way better than mine. She's really, really good. Okay, but I work with Jess and I help her. Maybe I can see some patterns that are happening in the NHL on power play. So I go through and I do all this research on power plays. Yeah, you see sometimes, you see bumper. My son's a one-timer on the power play and the bumper sometimes. So I made a whole clip for him too, but a little bit of personal work in there. But so ultimately, all of this has led to happiness. And this is my final part. Happiness is my guide for everything. Okay? I think personally, we all do the best when we're happy. Happy in our life, happy with our wives, our kids, happy in our job that we do. Happiness is the key to everything. It's also the key to making the chemicals in your body flow to be happy, to then perform, and the circle keeps going. But the biggest thing I've learned is to live the life yourself. So if I'm trying to teach my goalies, and I'll just give you my routine so that it makes more sense, but when I go to the rink, the first thing I do is I show up at the rink every day at 5 a.m. Anybody been in the gym here so far? I saw you in the gym, and I saw Aaron in the gym. And I've been there every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, okay? Every day I'm the first one at the rink. Every day I make sure I outwork everybody. I'm the first one in, last one out. Those are my rules for myself. But when I go to the rink, when I was on the treadmill, what am I doing? I'm listening to my earphones, right? Every day when I run on the treadmill, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm listening to something that I want to learn, but it's getting me into a positive mindset. It's bringing the energy. I'm learning something. Sometimes it's a motivational video if I'm really dragging ass, so then I'll listen to a motivational one, give myself a kick in the butt, all right? When I get off the treadmill, I stretch. When I stretch, I do my gratitude. Every morning I do my gratitude. I send out text messages to everybody I love. Have a great day. Hope you do well. Good luck with this presentation. Good luck with this. You know what? I really miss you. Let's make sure we go golfing. Hey, good luck with your game tonight. Old coaches that I coach with in juniors. Hey, good luck in the playoffs, so on and so forth. Every day, and I switch it up every day, do 10 other guys. You'd be amazed at when you give out positivity, how many guys give it back to you and make you feel good. And hey, good luck with you, Stevie. And when things are shitty, hey, don't worry about that game. We got pumped one game, 7-0, all right? That's a tough game to go through as a coach in the NHL. But then the amount of people that text me back, you're manifesting, you're putting out positive, and it's like a force field. It brings positivity back to you, right? I talk a lot about manifestation. I believe really, really wholeheartedly in manifestation. Now, I don't think of it as like magic, like, what are those Harry Potter? I don't think of it like magic or anything like that. But I think when you have a goal that you're shooting for, you emit that to everybody and you put it out there in the world, and eventually it comes through. And if you're prepared and if you work hard enough and you did all the right things, one day that person that you want is going to come into your life. That success that you want. So I really believe in the manifestation. So I work on that a lot. Okay? Love. I know the dreaded L word. Nobody knows. We're all tough guys. We don't want to talk about it. I tell my goalies I love them all the time. I appreciate what they do. I appreciate the work they put in. Joey Decord might be the hardest working guy. If you guys ever saw him, he's the #1 in fitness on our team. The guy is built like a Greek god. He is the hardest worker. I tell him I love him all the time. I appreciate him. I appreciate the work ethic. Grubauer, same thing. Maybe one of the greatest guys. Not quite as hard a worker as Joey, but he does things right and he's a good human being. I tell them all the time that I love them. And what's really amazing about this is I give them hugs all the time. I know that sounds really weird, but it's a little bit different because we're a small little group of us with the goalies. Good or bad, I give them hugs. I don't only give them hugs when they do well, I give them hugs when they do bad, I give them hugs every day, so that it's not like a Pavlov's response where they do shitty, I give them a hug. I give them a hug all the time. And what's really interesting about this is that then the players see that. And you'd be amazed at how many players on the team every day come in and hug me. And Jaden Schwartz had the best season of his career this year. Every single morning, if I don't give him a hug, where's my hug? And he wants the positive reinforcement. So anyways, the other part of doing this is that when you do all this for yourself and you feel great about yourself, you can then teach it to your goalies and help them to accomplish it. But then the next thing it does is it gives you really thick skin with the coaches. You got to have thick skin with the coaches. The coaches are under a lot of pressure. They got to think about 20 guys. They got to think about so many different things, the media, the team, the systems, managing 20 different players, managing the coaches, managing the general manager. The coaches are under amazing pressure in the NHL. Sometimes you're their outlet to just let go. Sometimes it's a bottle of wine and they just talk to you, and I've done that a bunch of times where I had the head coach in my room. I'm the guy, I call the head coach. I'm like, hey, I got a bottle of wine in my room. Let's chat. And the coach comes in the room, and I've done it with every single coach I've coached with, and I'm their venting, their sounding board. But the only reason I can do that is because I've built myself up every day so that I'm there for them and listen to it. And they complain to me about the goaltending, and sure, no problem. That's okay. But if I did the work and I'm prepared, I have the confidence to be able to have the thick skin around those guys. So what did you learn? At the end, if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. The other part is think for yourself. Everything you learned here is great. How are you going to put it into practice? I told you everything I know and everything I've done, but it's going to be how you interpret it and how you then put it out forward. But think for yourself. People know when you're not genuine. Mentors are key. Mentors have been a huge part of my career. Innovation, innovate, constantly innovating. Preparedness, be the most prepared person. The more prepared you are, the more protected you are. Work on your mental strength, work on yourself, positivity, control the controllables, and happiness. That's probably the hardest one of all, is try to find ways to create happiness. It allows you to be a better coach. So, wow, how long was that? 48 minutes?